Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the final series of Torchwood, Miracle Day. Written by Russell T Davies, Doris Egan, Jane Espasson, Jim Gray, John Espan, Ryan Scott, and John Frey, and is directed by Bara Naria, Billy Greyhart, Gary Fedland, and Gwyneth Honda Payton. Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful. This series is a co-production between the BBC and the American channel Starz. This series comes off the success of Torchwood's Children of Earth, which also had a series-long storyline. It basically, instead of having like individual episodes like series 1 and 2, you have just one big overarching story. One story, it's one massive long story throughout the series. However, this time we deal with 10 episodes instead of, I believe, Miracle Day. Children of Earth was like 7, or it was not a lot, 5 episodes. This is 10, and because each episode is an hour long, this has the distinction of making it the longest Doctor Who story in any form of televised canon. The closest would be the Daleks' Master Plan, which technically is got more episodes. I believe it's 30. It's 11, 12 if you count Mission to the Unknown. I've probably got my numbers mixed up there, but those were only half an hour long episodes. So this story would consist of essentially 20 classic Doctor Who episodes. That's basically an entire series worth of classic stories. That is just absolutely mental. It is, I believe it's the third longest. It's the second longest Doctor Who story overall. There is a 7th Doctor audio drama box set, which is in a similar vein of this, is One Big Giant Story, which is technically longer. But here, it's 10 hours long, essentially. Now, when you have that amount of time, when you have that amount of storytelling, you want each individual episode to count. You need to explain the characters, develop the plot line, and push the ideas further. With this one having a magnificent concept, probably one of the biggest concepts that you could do on an earthbound storytelling, and something which would have changed the ramifications of Torchwood if the series continued, because this planned production between Britain and American Torchwood series was actually supposed to kickstart a brand new series for Torchwood, with many hints and many characters being set up for later seasons. But you want this series to count, and with the big concept of, essentially, there's the concept of Miracle Day, the idea that nobody on the planet can die. Nobody has died in what they believe is a 24-hour period, but then it keeps happening and happening and happening, and nobody has died for at least, I believe, by the end of the story, it's 3 months into the miracle. It's called Miracle Day, but the series lasts more than a day. It's kind of strange when you think about it like that. And the big fact is that most of this was actually shot in America. It feels a lot more like American television, with many the way it's shot, the way it's directed, the camera angles, the kind of story it's telling, feeling very much like an American television program. We've also got many elements of popular American shows, like hospital dramas is a big thing over there, like shows like House and there's a few other ones I can't name off the top of my head. I'm not particularly a huge, massive fan of that type of genre, but you've also got your CIA, office workers kind of storylines as well. You've got this heavily political, not as in the concept of political, although this story, because it's Russell T Davies, is political, but political in that it deals with characters making decisions by government, and the main villains are government, and all that essential. So when this story comes out, you want every matter to count. You want your characters to count. You want your stories to count more than usual, because it's supposed to be this big, massive event. It's supposed to kick off a completely new era with a concept that feels like a massive, big event. The series was not picked up after this because of its it was critically panned, and by the end of it, the viewing figures were extremely low. I believe it was the lowest any Doctor Who franchise had been up to that point. I could be mistaken if you're not counting K9. But yeah, this series was critically and heavily panned, and right off the bat in the first episode, it's clear to see why. I'm not going to go into detail about every plot point, each little element, but I will say I might go into spoilers, so spoiler warning, in case. And we're talking about 10 episodes, there's a lot to unpack here. But let's go on to probably one of the biggest characters in the story. One of the characters that becomes this aura of where the plot lines follow around, with Oswald Danes, played by Bill Pullman. Basically, he was a rapist, a pedophile, and a murderer. We get basically the first thing that we see within the story is essentially him being executed in this newsreel, with the reporters basically stating that he was convicted for the rape and murder of I believe she was 13 years old, and they were like, Oswald is completely famous for his quote in the court asked, do you have any last words, any last things to say? To which he replied to, she should have run faster. And so he's basically putting on his deathbed, and he is getting his public execution, because in America the death penalty is still around, and so he's basically been sentenced to death. However, as soon as he is injected with the poison to end his life, Miracle Day starts happening, and he is at this point in incredibly amounts of pain, but he does not die. Essentially, his body just refuses to die. As everybody refuses to die, the entire world has just gone mental. Now, the thing with Oswald is, in terms of the story, because his death was due to be around on the Miracle Day, he is basically seen in the public figure as this heavenly, very important figure. He also points out this issue with the law that you can't sentence somebody twice for the same crime. So he actually gets off free and actually gets to leave prison with no consequences to that. That actual law is actually a myth. That does not exist. So right off the bat, this story isn't really connected to the real world. But Oswald is a very interesting character. I remember watching this. This was actually the only Torchwood story I watched as it aired. When this story came out, I was watching it as it aired. I have distinct memories of watching it because at the time, my family were moving from one house to another, and so we were living at a relative's house for a short time, and that short period was when the 10 episodes aired. So I have a very distinct memory of this. I remember thinking, what a horrible character, not in terms of him as a person, but just him, just as like trying to get me invested in the story. They make him clearly a scumbag, clearly this Hannibal Lecter-like character, but everybody around him is so stupid, so idiotic. The concept of him basically becoming this celebrity saint after not only what he did, he was accused of, but what he said in court is absolutely ridiculous. And to see, like, you see parts of the story where you see people getting interviewed and are like, Oswald Danes is actually like an angel or something. There's a bit where Jack actually gets chucked out of a building and a woman asks Jack, have you touched him? Have you seen him? What's he like? I absolutely love Oswald Danes. And you also have people reacting on the news and they're like disgusted by him, but then he breaks into tears, apologising for the murder of what he did, and automatically people are like, poor man, you know, it sucks even for him. That's just absolutely disgusting and mental, and it's really just, when the story aired, it's completely stupid. I really couldn't see the concept of somebody so disgusting, so clearly evil and horrible, just suddenly becoming like an icon with very little effort on his behalf. However, now, many years after, retroactively, there's a kind of a different viewpoint, is there? Because we, as a culture, have hired, maybe not convicted murderers and pedophiles, but we have had people who are extremely dangerous, completely idiotic, and people who put very little effort into trying to make the world a better place. And we've actually put them in Parliament and in offices. We've put them in the White House. We've put them in 10 Downing Street with Boris Johnson, Donald Trump. The idea of Oswald Danes scarily has become more realistic as time's gone by. I still, however, defend the concept that it's not very well handled here. The story tries to treat him as this, he knows a bit more than he's telling, and basically everything centres around him because he becomes this celebrity figure. Jack kind of clicks on that he is the one who's kind of profiting the most from this miracle. Following him would basically lead them to who's really behind this miracle. And it's just, it doesn't really work. It's just, it feels very like if the main baddies just let Oswald do what he wants to do and build him up, what would honestly be the difference? If they did nothing with Oswald, all they would have done is have stopped Torchwood from gaining a connection. Speaking of Torchwood, let's go to our main characters. In terms of the original cast, only 2 of the main Torchwood teams remains. Jack and Gwen, of course her partner Reese, as well as her parents, return to the series, making them the only real recurring characters from the BBC era of the series. Gwen, if it wasn't for the fact that I have grown up with the character and I've seen her since Everything Changes in the first episode of Torchwood, I would have considered her a really unlikable character here. There's a lot of moments where she is not like, she's angry and upset for little or no reason, but there are a lot of times where it is justified, like she is upset about her father, and there's a whole concept later down the line. But in terms of her being introduced earlier on in the episode 1, if it wasn't for the fact that this character has been appeared in the series before, it would be a horrible introduction to the character. With a scene, her introduction scene is her in her house. She's trying to live with her baby. I believe the baby's a Gwenethia or something, and Reese, her boyfriend, and basically she's worried that, like, because of her time in Torchwood, people would be endangering her. So when they knock on the door, they start panicking, and when Gwen opens the door, she's just like, "Get off my property." When she realizes that the people are just innocent bystanders, and that's kind of just messed up. It feels vastly different to how Gwen would in the previous series. Luckily, Reese is still as fun as ever, and I'm not saying Gwen is a terrible character here. I just feel like if this was your first introduction to the character, story doesn't give you a good job to care or really interested in the characters. The only real interest in this is really Jack, and he actually goes through a interesting dilemma here. Everybody on the planet has essentially become immortal, but it's kind of reversed for him. As somebody who's usually immortal, he doesn't heal. He has a scratch on his arm that doesn't heal. He seemingly is able to die like every other human on the planet. That's a really great concept and a really great idea. However, until when you get to like the third or fourth episode, that just kind of stops and is mainly just used as a joke. And I feel like you get a scene where he's poisoned on a plane, and that's like actually like is really interesting and really dynamic, and there's a lot of great moments and action beats in that. However, after that concept just kind of disappears. They still, of course, established that he can die, but it's nothing that ever becomes a hindrance to the main character's plans and plots. It's really strange, it's really odd. We also have our new characters. We have Mecha Pfiffer as Rex, this CIA agent who is basically, he's your stereotypical CIA agent. He has that grouchy voice. He's always on the phone. He sleeps with his doctor, and there's not really much about him. They do make this effort of trying to establish this kind of that his relationship with his family is strange. Like when he is in the hospital, presumably dying because he gets stabbed in the chest. They try and contact his family. However, the only record of family is his father in, I want to say, Chicago. But when they try and contact his father, there's never any reply or any indication that the father has any interest. Later on in the series, Rex actually meets his father in a scene. After that, the character's relationship with his parents, never mentioned again, never part of the plot. That's, I think, was the biggest weakness with Miracle Day, and what makes it so dull is that the characters here are just your bare bone in terms of making them an interesting personality, making them into people. But I like how the story actually deals with the concept of Miracle Day, and you do start to get this big anxiety by the fact that this world is going to suffer a huge problem of overpopulation, of Medicaid, because people, they've become immortal, they can't die, however they still feel pain. And I feel like the concept here is actually really greatly established to a point. What do I mean by that? Well, in the first episode, we see somebody trying to kill Jack, and one of the characters who we'll talk about later, and he basically straps himself to a bomb and he explodes. He is split into many pieces. However, because of Miracle Day, he's still alive, and we get this really, probably the most iconic thing in the series. I remember, because this is probably the first time I've seen something adult like this in a series of like Doctor Who, in Torchwood like this. So this scene really stuck out in my mind watching it back in 2011, in which you see this, it's not really a corpse because he's not dead, but he's just like completely burnt. His lower half is just completely like torn off, but the guy is still alive. You can see his eyes moving and he's blinking. And Jack, who's in disguise at that point, basically asks, what if we cut his head off? What if we take all of the veins and the tubes from the neck, which you can see, cut them and see if that kills him? To which it does not. They detach the head from the body, and the person is still not only alive, is conscious. And you get a lot of great scenes and really terrifying concepts like this. Later on in the series, we essentially learn that because of the overpopulation, the world's governments have found a solution. What solution is that? They basically take everybody which is described as a category 0, which is somebody who is essentially the closest thing you're going to get to brain dead in this miracle, and basically put them in a furnace to burn. And from what the story is basically establishing is them as dust now in the air, them going in flames. They're going to be completely conscious for all of that. That is some really heavy level shit right there. That's really disturbing and really can make you feel really anxious. And also, again, another thing which in retroactively makes this story feel really realistic, the idea that the world has having a massive issue which revolves around shortages, specifically in the healthcare system like the NHS and everything else around the world. But I know governments decide to come with a solution, but only just push aside the issue and just trying to basically try and kill as many people as they can to try and get rid of the problem. That's realistic as hell. Now that we've seen what the world has come into, that's just mental. That is just absolutely mental. But it's only to a point, because there's a lot of scenes with this concept really strange and really bizarre. In fact, in the first episode, Gwen uses a rocket launcher to destroy a helicopter which is following them. That, in a sense, it's a pretty great action scene. You get the car on the beach, you get the helicopter flying from him, and Gwen uses the rocket launcher, and you get the blades almost hitting him as it crashes into the sand and blows up in the flame. And our characters laugh about it and seem to have no issues the wiser after destroying the helicopter. And when that scene played, all you can think about is there were at least 2 people in that helicopter. Are they still alive? Are you laughing? Are you enjoying this little moment after right in front of somebody who's not only alive, but is just purely and utterly in torture? It seems really out of character for them and feels really strange and bizarre. The story doesn't feel interested in telling it. It essentially focuses, the entire plot is mainly focused on Oswald Danes and this mystery surrounding the government wanting to basically silence Torchwood. There's an organisation that seems to be running the world essentially, which is tied into this health pharmacy company, which seemingly has knowledge of Miracle Day before it happened and is basically prepared for it. And I tell you how dull this series is. I've still got one more character I need to talk about. We have Ethra, played by Alexa Havrins, and she is the one of the office workers in the CIA, and she basically at the start of the series, somebody has hacked into their systems, leaving the line of Torchwood everywhere. basically putting Torchwood in FBI's radar. And she basically is like, there's something more to this hacking than what meets the eye. And essentially she meets up with Jack, and she basically becomes friends with our characters. And she is basically the new Tosh of the series, the quiet, awkward. I think there's nothing said in dialogue, but the performance seems to say and suggest that she has some sort of interest in Rex. Later down the line, we also see that she has a sister that she looks after, and she is, she struggles. Her sister struggles with looking after her kids. She's not stable in mindset, and so she's kind of forced to put her family through hell and call up the child security line to take her kids away from her sister. Now, Ethra, in some ways, is actually a really interesting character. She's a character who's basically like Gwen from the first series. Somebody who's quite new to this. She doesn't know the rules. She uses her phone when they're on the run. She goes and meets her sister while supposed to be in hiding. She's somebody who, of course, is not stupid, but she clearly is struggling to gain a grasp of the situation, and she's gone from a normal life to essentially becoming a part of Torchwood in a matter of hours, and it's all just reflected on her. However, there's so little of it. Like, this concept doesn't get introduced until like the later half of the series, that she's just not that interesting. I mean, she is interesting, but only in the later half, and the first half really struggles to give her really anything to do, despite the majority of the story treating her as essentially the main character. She is the one that we spend the most time with in terms of how the camera is shot, how much screen time we have, and I can't really say much about her. The actress does a great job here. Alexa does. She brings this awkward shyness, but also this sturdiness to her, and she just feels really down to earth. I have nothing against the performance. I really wish that if Torchwood would come back, that she at least would have returned. She would be, because at the end of the series, she gets killed after the ending of Miracle Day. But yeah, she's an okay character. So let's talk about our villains. We essentially learn that there's these families, an organisation known as the Three Families. Essentially, they basically have put themselves hidden away in Earth's government. Essentially, think of Hydra from Captain America: The Winter Soldier. It's essentially the same concept. And they basically, many years ago, have taken Jack's blood and trying to find a way to make immortality. They've also learned of a strange phenomenon, natural phenomenon on Earth known as the Blessing, which they actually use to create this event where everybody becomes immortal simultaneously. It all happened at once. It is absolutely their plan. The organisation, however, are vastly uninteresting. You set up the building blocks for the mystery. You have characters seemingly going against their bosses. They have this triangle representing the three families. You have this character that goes to this reporter that works for Oswald, Gillian her name was, and this character goes to Gillian and is like, you have been selected to take a promotion to work with our family. Are you interested? And when the series keeps going and going, you're waiting to learn more, waiting to get some more information. But when you learn more, the less interesting it becomes. In fact, when we see the faces, as you will, the individuals who are essentially running the organisation, they get introduced in episode 9, And one of them, I can't tell you a thing about him other than he's the guy of the two. One is a man, one's a woman, and the woman seems to have this really strange connection with the blessing, and has the over top kind of dialogue. It's like, oh, if you did this, if you stop it, everyone will die, and blah 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 blah. But yeah, I can't think of anything about them. They're just not that interesting. They're just not. That's just to sum up Miracle Day as a whole. It's a massive failure, and it would have been worse if it was a single part. In fact, there's so much story here to only do really a half an episode of a normal Torchwood episode. 2 episodes, you're going to be stretching it. 10 episodes? Way too much. Which is a shame because, like I said, the concept is so good. Somebody should essentially remake this, take it out of the Doctor Who canon, make it its own like series. The idea that nobody can die, that everybody just stops dying. And essentially you can do what Walking Dead has done with zombies, where this situation gets worse and worse and worse, and we just see how the world adapts. We see like people living in the environment. But the problem is with this story is that because of it being in a big franchise, this concept can't last forever. It has to end at one point. And 2, the characters that we do follow, that we do hang around with, because again, it's the franchise. You need to like focus more on like the villains and try and stop in this. Our characters who aren't interesting to begin with have to basically think about less about how the world is currently functioning at the moment, although there are some great moments like Gwen trying to get her father out of one of the camps, and Rex's girlfriend basically trying to uncover a conspiracy. But the majority of the plot is about our characters trying to find out about the families and trying to work out how Oswald Danes is tied to everything. And when it does that, when it's focusing on its own main plot, the story just really doesn't hold up. This could even be considered, this would easily make it into my top 10 least favourite Doctor Who stories of all time, if you count it as a Doctor Who story. And yeah, it's just overall just it's just not really that good. And the fact that Torchwood ended on such a low bummer note is just really sad. And the fact that as well, the story at the end teases more things to come. As that character is talking about Gillian, she basically gets reunited with that agent that works with the 3 families, and it's like everything is destroyed, but we are getting ready for plan B. Everything seemingly, not that everything worked to plan, but things are moving in the right direction, so plan B can go ahead. Are you interested? Yes? Okay, come with me. And that's basically how the series ends. So it teases a next series. Big finish. You should make like a movie-length audio drama concluding that storyline, concluding Miracle Day. Miracle Day part 11. And then just try and continue the series from there. And try to just because I don't know, it felt like there's so much potential here, but in terms of how the writing, how it's directed, there's enough here to fill maybe half an hour worth of content. It's almost disgusting in how little it takes advantage of its premise, and that's really Miracle Day. Just a bland, forgettable mess of a story. So join me next time when we go back to the Kane's 9 series with, hold on, I can't remember what it's called, The Last Persistent. I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-da!